also an awfully bad place to be attacked through. So you think of the Confederates, if they even had intended to attack through there, which they didn't anyway,
Right.
that would have been that was terrible ground to attack over, which then gives the defense even more of an advantage. So that was one thing about that argument of Sickles moving up to get to where he had better ground. But yeah, you didn't have great ground here, but the attacking ground was terrible. Like to try to move a regiment through the woods and attack through all that area was not.
I've always wondered how he could mitigate that. If he occupies that line, how does he mitigate that one area? And I think you put a battery back towards the east where they can set up in that wood line where the modern day road goes up and just have them sitting there loaded with canister. If any Confederates come through that tree line into that muck, they're not moving very fast, and you just tear into them. You don't need any infantry in that spot. And if you do, apparently the New Jersey Brigade's behind you because you got a big monument back there.
I was going to say, the Confederates would have come through there and realized that people from New Jersey were there and said, the heck with that.
Yeah. Too many tolls. Yeah.
So that's how we slow them down.
Yeah.
Too many tolls.
Charge them money to come through the woods and the swamp.
Addressing Gettysburg.
Live on SD card from the Seminary Ridge Museum and Education Center, it's Addressing Gettysburg's 162nd anniversary of the Battle of Gettysburg Town Hall, where you, the audience, are just as important as the host and the expert guest. Tonight's guest historian is licensed battlefield guide Lewis Trott. And now, here's your host, Matt Callery.
Hello, everybody. Welcome to this anniversary discussion, the 162nd anniversary. Can you believe we're that old? We are. And today we're talking about July 2nd, and we've got an audience here at the Seminary Ridge Museum and Education Center. We're down in the lobby because we figured, well, there's more room down here, so we come down here. And Lewis Trott is our guest today, our guest guide, Lewis Trott. Lewis had a very big day today. He came all the way up from Virginia and gave our first get out of the car tour of the season. 2 hours walking around in the pouring rain. Well,
Close.
It wasn't
Close.
pouring rain, but it
rained a little bit.
It looked like it was going to rain.
Yep.
And it didn't. Substantially. And we had a nice time. But then Lewis went back home to Virginia, took a shower, picked up his lovely lady, brought her up here, and he's going to do this with us tonight.
That is called addressing Gettysburg support at its finest.
That's right.
I mean,
it is.
Your other guests aren't doing that.
Here's your check.
They don't live a long They don't live a long way away like me either.
No, they don't.
I got your receipt. So, all
right, so
it's a pleasure to be here.
Yeah, it's a pleasure to have you, and we always have fun with Lewis. So we expect that we're going to have a fun crowd. We have a nice-sized crowd of about 20 people here tonight, and they're coming from all over the place: Texas, Florida, Buffalo, New York. Where else? Pennsylvania.
Indiana.
That's
Indiana.
right. Indiana. Another Indiana. Where? North Carolina. All right, so we got people from all over the place here, and we certainly appreciate them coming out and joining us. So what we're going to do now is have a discussion about July 2nd, and we're completely winging this. I didn't even think of a first question to ask everybody. Did you?
No.
All right.
I was thinking about Laws Brigade, which is July 2nd, but that was this morning.
Well, why don't we do something and start at the beginning of July 2nd,
All right.
midnight. What goes on at midnight-ish?
A lot of people are sleeping because they're wore out.
Right.
Yeah. And Lee probably doesn't know what he's going to do the next day. He's got thoughts of moving Ewell around to his right. Ewell doesn't want to do that. He says it wouldn't be good for the morale of the troops to give up ground that they've gained. So I think there's a lot of indecision still as far as the Confederates go. By this time on the Union side, their army is up, everyone except the 6th Corps. So they are getting in place and getting ready to go for the next day and trying to strengthen their position. I say everybody's up a portion of the 3rd Corps hadn't arrived on the field yet. They'll arrive in the morning of July 2nd. And, of course, the 6th Corps is moving up. But, again, on the Confederate side, though, and they're the ones that are going to initiate the attacks, there's a lot of indecision still, I think, on the part of Lee, but as far as what they're going to do.
So just before dawn, Lee sends out Captain Johnston.
He sends out Captain Johnston. He's looking for the Union left flank because Lee's decided that's where he wants to concentrate his main blow at. Captain Johnston and William Pendleton goes out on a reconnaissance of his own. But they're both trying to figure out where the Union left flank ends because the Confederates want to move down there, get on the flank, and drive it in like they did at Chancellorsville. The objective for July 2nd and 3rd is Cemetery Hill. That is the key spot on the battlefield. If you get the Union Army off that hill, they've got to go somewhere else because that hill commands the Taneytown Road and the Baltimore Pike. Those are the 2 most important roads here at Gettysburg as far as military operations go. So if you want the Union Army out of here, you've got to get them off that hill. So that's why they're looking for the Union left flank. They want to move down, get on the end of it, and drive it in.
So now I'm interested in the audience. Kevin, go ahead.
So this was kind of my thought about this thing.
Just speak up a little, Kevin,
Okay,
please.
this is like where I wander a lot. So I'm going to bring up Sickles only because did he have the pain map, right? Is that the map that was handed out to all the Union Corps commanders?
I didn't hear you.
The pain map?
Oh, after when Meade gets here and
Yes.
he meets with his commanders, then he rides the ridge.
Yeah.
And he's got a major that's able to draw it while he's riding along.
Yeah.
And he makes copies for
Right.
all
Did
the
Sickles
corps
not have,
commanders.
do we know, did he not get a copy of that or?
I don't know if he got a copy of the map. He's told to occupy that particular line of Cemetery Ridge where the 12th Corps had previously been, Gary's division. According to Sickles, he says, well, Gary's division really wasn't lined up anywhere. They're sort of on the north slope of Little Round Top, but they're not occupying the top of the hill. They're not in a formal line, and then they move off early in the morning towards Culp's Hill. So, this is my opinion, but Sickles plays a game. He's playing a game with Meade. That doesn't mean that Meade is without fault, because Meade has blame of his own. He doesn't go talk to Sickles soon enough, but he's occupied with the right flank because he's thinking of attacking. And he's worried. He thinks that's his weak spot, the right flank over by Culp's Hill. And so his mind is over there. He wants Sickles to occupy this one portion of the line, and then Sickles starts playing games, in my estimation. They don't like each other, so that doesn't help. But then, Meade sends his aide, Captain Meade, his son. What authority he has other than being this messenger. And everybody here's Patreon?
Most, I think.
Is everybody Patreon? If not, I would join Patreon and listen to the latest episode with Doug Dowds that I listened to yesterday. Talks about the staffs of the 2 armies, and it talks about the difference in the staffs, but in the authority they have when they go out and issue instructions. Perhaps Sickles sees Captain Meade ride down here, a young guy. He's just the son of the commander, probably a little nepotism going on there, but maybe he doesn't take him seriously when he says he wants you to occupy this line. And he says, well, go back and tell your dad, I don't know where he wants me to go still. So it's this back and forth. And to your original question, I don't know if he ever gets a physical copy of the map.
Okay.
It wouldn't surprise me if he does and still plays dumb.
Right. Yeah, he's buying it.
Yeah.
Follow on that. Do we know where the Confederates think the line ended?
Well, if Captain Johnston rides down there south of the Peach Orchard, all over the place, that from Warfield Ridge south and cutting across to the east to the base of the Round Tops at least, he's riding all through there, and he doesn't run into a substantial number of Union soldiers. I believe he says there's a few people on individuals on horseback I see, and I go out of my way to avoid them. And then he says he gets to Little Round Top, but doesn't see the 4-man signal station up there. Maybe he's on a different hill, but he's in that area, and he doesn't see the end. That means, in Lee's mind, the end has to be north of there. So it's at a minimum at the Peach Orchard, but east. on Cemetery Ridge, because if there are troops in the Peach Orchard, and there are, Buford's cavalry's there. How spread out they are, I don't know. But his report doesn't intimate that he saw troops there. So in my mind, Meade's thinking, at least from that point north is where the line is. It's no further south than the Peach Orchard.
And I've heard it said about the Pennsylvania Monument, or just south of the Pennsylvania.
Yeah,
somewhere around there.
by nightfall, that's what they could see, and that's about where they end, right?
There was heavy fog that morning. We get that from some New York soldiers in, I think it's Geary's division, and they write about how foggy it is that morning. So that does hamper your vision, anything you could see. But it's noisy.
So that's what I'm saying. The Third Corps was missed somehow, assuming Johnston got further north.
Well, the entire Third Corps is not on the field yet. They're still moving up from
Memphis.
Memphis.
Right? So a big chunk of it.
No, when Johnston is going, it's a division of the 12th Corps that's on.
Yeah, but the Third Corps is not far from there, right? Weren't they bivouacked like George Wickett?
They're supposed to be around there.
Yeah.
But
I mean, they're not in any sort of formation.
You mean pre-dawn?
Pre-dawn. Right?
Yeah,
They got
yeah.
in there around midnight. Didn't they?
Well, yeah,
part of it does.
They come in and Geary, they relieve Geary, right?
Yeah, they're supposed to relieve Geary.
Geary in the morning.
They relieve him in the morning.
They've been there since the night. Like they just rolling, like it's like rolling into a friend's house late at night.
'Cause about-
you just crash, right? Kind of like on the couch or something. They
Yeah,
just crash
yeah.
sort of like
Geary's
couch.
division takes off about 4:30 in the morning to go where they're. My thing is, and think about the third day when the Confederate troops move in and occupy the breastworks on Lower Culp's Hill. And that night, they hear movement on the Baltimore Pike. They think the Union Army's retreating. My point is, they can hear that. Johnston's riding around early morning, and he might not be able to see anything, but he should be able to hear something. Just like the Confederates do the next morning, moving on the Baltimore Pike, because he's close to the Taneytown Road. And there's stuff moving up the Taneytown Road. So,
well, and he even talks about going. We always talk so much about he goes on to Little Round Top, but then there's also talk that he left Little Round Top, went south of Little Round Top, and all the way down around that way. So there's some mixed messages that he even almost got all the way to where he could have seen the Baltimore Pike, but
maybe
he never reports actually have seen anything. So
Yeah.
there's a whole lot of.
and that's one of the enduring
confusion
mysteries that'll never be solved unless somebody has some mysterious letter up in their attic.
So what other thoughts do you guys have about Johnston's ride?
Jeff, I had so you're talking about Johnston. It was one of the thoughts that I've had is in the fog being early morning on Tuesday or the second is kind of new to me. But I've wondered why he couldn't recall his route, right? Like he was leading Longstreet's divisions and everything that way, but yet he couldn't recall which route he took to get to the Round Top.
Well, is that so hard to believe?
Well, my thought would be is that at this point in the war, if you're sent out to reconnoiter that position and you're coming back, like I'd like to, in my mind,
So
I think
even if it's in the dark, even if it's foreign territory, you should still be able to remember that.
Landmarks.
I'm thinking, that's my thought is at that point, I'd like to think he kind of knew which way he got
shave some bark off a tree every once in a while.
Tie a piece of your clothing to a branch.
Yeah.
And it did get me thinking this morning as we were walking the grounds to just how wild the ground undulates there.
Yeah.
Which enlightened me a lot more, which is why the cartoons are so great. But it just for life of me, kind of blows my mind that he couldn't recall where he went to, which then in my head leads me to believe he didn't actually get to where he thought he was going to.
Could be that.
Which is where then at that point you're too afraid to admit I didn't get where I thought I went.
Well, if his job is to find the flank, maybe he's not thinking about remembering how he gets down there. He just wants to get down there without being seen, figure out where the flank is, and get back. So, but
Well, and also
we don't know. I understand your point.
Buford's cavalry is, like you said, it's out at the Peach Orchard, but they've got patrols going down Pumping Station Road, correct?
Yep.
So, I mean, they've got them all over the place, not just Pumping Station. So there's got to be, that's what always got me was like, there's cavalry out there. And Johnston's not alone.
No, he's got a couple people.
He's got other guys with him.
Yeah. And
So
then there's Pendleton's
one guy-
out there roaming around too.
Isn't there also a question about how from when he left and when he came back, for him to get where he thought he got, it's impossible for
Yeah.
him to get there and get back.
Right, the amount of time.
The amount of
yeah,
time he would have needed.
I did hear that.
And going off of Jeffrey's point here, that if you're not familiar with the ground and you're going in the early morning hours, that ground down there, how can you tell the difference between Bushman Hill,
Yeah.
Big Round Top, Little Round Top?
Yeah.
It's really, and all the ridges,
Or even
Warfield
Devil's
Ridge
Den.
and Devil's Den. It's really a difficult bit of ground to get your hands on unless you're actually there on
Yeah.
the ground.
Yeah.
And I've seen it in full daylight. Sam Johnston is a man who's performing the duty on Lee's staff that Lee performed on Winfield Scott's staff during the Mexican War. He's a reconnaissance engineer and officer. He's going out there to look at ground and find ways and avenues of approach potentially for an army or to see if there's an enemy in a particular area. And so what Lee is relying on Johnston is basically to give the report back to him what he would have given back to Scott, that type of relationship. So my thing here is not necessarily where he got, it's what he says to Lee that's very important.
Yeah.
When he says to Lee, I got to the high ground.
Yes.
South. And doesn't Lee ask, is this where you got?
Yes.
And
Did
he
you
said,
get there?
"Yes,
Yeah.
This is where I got.
But then he says, in the follow-up question, is there anyone out there?
Yeah.
He says no.
Right.
And that's the key to this entire
Yeah.
story, is not whether he got out there, but what he tells Lee that leads on to the planning. for
Yeah,
that day.
yeah.
And,
Yeah.
But from all reports, Johnston was good at his job. So it's not like they just picked somebody and
So
said,
I'm
go.
glad you said that.
And now we have this impression that he's
Exactly.
like this bumbling fool.
Yeah, so I've always had the impression that it was just some staff officer.
No.
But no, he's got experience. This is not his first
been doing
rodeo.
this
Wait, he
time.
was
Yeah.
at Stonewall, wasn't he?
Yeah, and he's a trained engineer.
Yeah.
And he stays on
Drives the
staff
train.
with Lee
Yeah, as
beyond
an
it.
engineer, you
Yeah.
remember some topographic features.
Yeah, well, that's a good point too. So maybe that's to Jeff's
He
point.
had done really good work for another Confederate officer. I think it was Jackson. Not
Yeah,
entirely sure. I can't remember off the top of my head. But
We
he
talked
gotten
about
a lot of, and Jackson had really promoted him to Lee. And then obviously when Jackson was killed, he sort of moved over. I got the impression with Lee.
And again,
Yeah.
there were lots of Confederates that didn't perform up to what they were.
Well, yeah.
typically did.
They had their worst 3 days.
Yeah.
That's true.
There's a lot of unions.
So, all right. So Johnston goes back to Lee. He says, yes, I got there. There's nobody there. And this is what? The foundation for Lee's plan for the day, right?
Yep.
So he's going completely off of this.
Yep.
All right, give us a little bit of background on that and
So-
what the plan's going to be.
He wants, during the early morning hours, AP Hill's going to move his corps down Seminary Ridge. And it gets to a little bit beyond where the Florida Monument is today, if you can visualize that. That'll be the right flank then of the Confederate Army at that point. Lee wants to use Longstreet, bring Longstreet's corps up, extend that line, have McLaws' division move out, get perpendicular to the Emmitsburg Road around the area of the Peach Orchard. At that point, drive to the northeast, have more Confederates come out of the woods by the Henry Spangler farm, and then have Ewell's corps on the other end of the line, the left flank by Culp's Hill, tie those troops down. And again, the objective is Cemetery Hill. And he wants them to get in place and do this as soon as possible. And there's where the problem lies. It takes a long time. Longstreet's not really on board with that. They're having problems with this. Lee and Longstreet, what are we really going to do? At one point, Lee is showing McLaws exactly how he wants to place his division and attack up the road. Longstreet turns around and says, no, I want you like this, more parallel. Lee says in front of McLaws, no, this is how I want you. I'm here to tell you, although I was just a lowly enlisted master sergeant, you don't tell your subordinate how you want them to function operationally in front of their commander. Lee was wrong when he did that. He should have said, pulled Longstreet aside, said, this is what I want, let's make it happen. No ifs, ands, or buts. And let Longstreet tell McLaws, rather than do that in front of, it undercuts Longstreet authority when you do that. Anybody's authority, if that's how you operate. So there's a lot of problems and argument going back and forth about what they're going to do. having said all that, by the time they actually get moved, and then Longstreet says, well, can I wait on Law's brigade? And Lee agrees to that. Lee wants him to get going, but then Lee agrees. And as I said this morning, if Longstreet moves down there without Law's brigade, they attack earlier. I don't know what turns out, but they have less men. And so they wait on Law, they use Law, and they still don't accomplish what they're trying to. So
Law was his biggest brigade, wasn't it?
Longstreet's?
Law.
Yeah, he was Longstreet's biggest brigade?
Yeah.
I'd have to look at the numbers.
I think I read that.
Yeah, it could be. And they're a good brigade, but they have to march 26 miles to get here. And it takes a while. Took me 6 hours last year to run the dumb thing. So if you can call that running, it just because of, and let me make this point. This is a crucial point. By the time Lee gets everything going and the operation is set in motion, that intelligence is now stale and it's no longer valid.
So yeah,
that's the big.
let's get into that then with everybody. So Lee makes the plans. Go ahead. I want to hear your thoughts on everything. Go ahead. 6 questions.
So looking at this, I think one of the crucial things that happens is when Meade arrives in the morning hours. My question is this. Had Meade determined to stay there and fight before he got to Gettysburg? Or did he make that decision after he talks with his commanders and looks at the ground? Because Lee's attack is based on the fact that if the Union Army is going to be there, could Meade have possibly retreated, fallen back into Maryland if he wanted to at that point? Because day one had gone badly. So could he have done that?
He could have done that, but I think by virtue of him ordering the army there, when he decides to leave his headquarters down at Tawnytown, once he says, all right, everybody move this way, he just wants to verify that this is the right move by asking his commanders when he gets here. But I think he's fully committed at that point, despite what Dan Sickles would tell you.
That comes from Hancock.
Yeah,
That's why I said Hancock
Yeah.
up here.
Exactly
Yeah.
right.
Yeah.
Hancock kind of tells him it can be turned,
Yes,
but
exactly.
it's a pretty good spot.
Yeah, and it's interesting, though, that point. Hancock says our left can be turned, but when Meade gets here, what is he focused on? The right.
Yeah.
So
Anybody else? Any
I
thoughts?
talked more than Jim Pangberg and Coney did last week. I listened to it. I mean, I don't know what's going on. And I just gave a 2-hour tour this morning where I had to yell at everybody to be heard. So let's talk.
Oh, yeah. So, come on. Let's hear more from you. Go ahead.
Before Sickles sends out the sharpshooters and they run into Wilcox, where does the Meade and the Union, where do they think the Confederates are? That's my question. And up to when do they kind of discover them over there in the woods? How far south do they think that they are down Seminary Ridge?
Oh.
I don't know, because again, Buford's out there and they're patrolling. So they don't think they're, I don't think they.
So they know that they're not.
Yeah, they're not south of Peach Orchard.
Yeah.
But I don't know if they have a firm grasp on where the end of the line is. Again, Meade is focused on the right.
Well, that's with him being focused there, he's kind of treating Sickles like it's the rear, and then maybe his mind's gonna get in his mind. It kind of is, where it's more like, what's the big, what's the fuss? I gave you the orders, we ain't got to get into specifics here. You're in the rear. Just kind of do what you got to do. Well, why? What's all the back and forth here? You're the sideshow right now. Type. Of
Yeah.
thing.
And that's how Sickles feels. He feels like a sideshow, but he's nervous. He sees the Peach Orchard. It is higher ground. If you stand where Sickles is supposed to be, where you can see the Peach Orchard, you can't see the other side of it. It is higher ground, and that's why he sends out that patrol. So he doesn't move out in a vacuum. He does have information that that's where the Confederate line is. So I give him that.
Well, it seems to me that the conversation him and Hunt have, Hunt's kind of like, well, maybe before you move out here, you should check those woods. And then
Yeah.
And then Sickles checks him and moves out. It seemed like Sickles was going to move out anyway.
Well, he tries to get Hunt to say, this is a pretty good idea. This is what I would do.
Yeah.
And Hunt says, oh, no, buddy.
He's like, I'm coming out.
This is your show. You're dragging me into this mess.
So if you found him or not, you're like, well, I found him, so then I had to move out to make sure it was stopped.
Yeah.
But if I wasn't found him, he'd have found an excuse to move out on that too.
Well, yeah, he tells Lincoln I moved out because Meade wants to retreat. So, Depends on what day it is for the excuse he'll give you.
Yeah.
Yeah, and for Sickles, it's not as if he just goes, I'm doing this without communicating this to Meade at all. What he's doing is he's trying to get Meade's attention throughout much of the morning about looking at that potential piece of ground.
Right.
See, it's not popular to defend Dan Sickles, but in this case, he's trying to get clarification from Meade. Now, where Sickles may be wrong here is that, or maybe, is that Meade tells him, basically, go where I told you to be. And Sickles moves anyway.
But yeah, they meet face to face before the 3:30 or the 3 o'clock staff meeting that he shows up late for. They meet face to face before that, and you're right.
So when Sickles is trying to get Meade's attention, at any point does he say there are Confederates out in the woods to get the permission to go, or is he just saying, can I move out? Can I move out? Can I move out?
I can't recall if he actually sends back that information or he keeps it to himself.
Because, you're pointing out how Meade is focused on the right.
Yep.
Right? And then poor Sickles is there saying, Daddy, look at me. Daddy, look at me. But if he had just said, there's Confederates in my front, then now the focus on the right might be at least split with the left. Yeah. But it almost seems like Meade doesn't focus on the left until the left is,
until it's too late.
Really, until it's really engaged.
Yeah.
I think the argument of there's Confederates in my front is a reason for him not to be there, because Hunt told him, if there's Confederates there, you can't hold this.
Sure, yeah.
So that shouldn't be a justification to go.
But at least
justification not to go.
Correct, but at least let him know, right? Like say we've got a threat coming on the left now. But
I feel like Sickles was very much like, hey, Mom, can I have ice cream? No, you can't have ice cream. Mom, can I have ice cream? No, you can't have ice cream.
Then he goes to
Hey,
Dad.
Can I have ice cream? No, you can't have ice cream. Grandma, can I have ice cream? Yeah, sure, go ahead and have ice cream.
Oh, just a little.
I've got a question, Lewis, about Meade's, I won't call it a fixation, but what he's looking at on the right. Do you think that was to push the Confederates further away from the Baltimore Pike and the Tawnytown Road?
It's possible, knowing how important those roads are. Meade knows how. His supply lines come up the Baltimore Pike. It could very well be that, yeah. But
I mean, he never articulates it. He never.
No. But it's interesting that, you hear about people that are Meade detractors will say that, well, Meade just fought a defensive battle. He did what things allowed. He's thinking offensively the very next morning when he's here. He shows up around midnight, and the very next morning he's thinking offensively. And then rightly so, he sends out Gouverneur Warren. I think Hunt goes out there too. That might not be right. I'm not sure, but I know Warren goes out there and looks, and I think Gary or Slocum goes out there. It's impossible to attack in there, and the Confederates find that out when they come the opposite way. But Meade has it in his mind, this is what we want to do, and it could very well be for those reasons.
Is it possible that it's the artillery? I mean, we focus so much on Ewell's attack on the 2nd and the 3rd, and we focus on the Union defensive artillery positions. Is it possible that Meade, when he's looking on the morning of July 2nd, could it be, those are fantastic artillery positions on the right. Could it be the artillery is maybe what is taking his position towards the right, saying, hey, listen, I can attack here because I have good support, fire support on that side?
It could be, but I don't think all the artillery's set up at that point. You've got some there, but not all that's going to eventually arrive. So, and I think he's thinking infantry more so.
And Culp's Hill and even Wolf Hill are not conducive to artillery, even at that point.
No, but they do get guns up on Culp's Hill. The Union Army does, and then you've got those guns lined up on Cemetery Hill coming down the Baltimore Pike and then East Cemetery Hill. So you've got a great platform.
When we're talking about ground, can you describe, Lewis, what the ground looks like that Sickles was ordered to occupy? What does that ground look like today? What did it look like then?
So the most familiar spot, the left end would be Little Round Top. So that's the left. So everybody knows what that was. You come off Little Round Top, and what you do is you go down to the lowest point of Cemetery Ridge. To the west is Plum Run. Everything around Plum Run is very marshy. So that creek runs north.
It's modern day Lake Crawford for those of you who are confused.
Yes, thank you.
Yeah.
Getting bigger by the second. For those of y'all that weren't with us today, we walked down by the Slider Farm, cross Plum Run on the little bridge right there. There's another beaver dam that they built.
New lake coming by the end of the summer.
Yeah, we'll have to rename that one. We're gonna have a dedication.
Like Farnsworth.
Like Farnsworth, yeah. But they'll be offering. Remember those tricycles, the big, huge wheels you take on the water. That's what they'll be offering down there.
It's a whole new experience to visit the battlefield. So,
yep,
there's ways to make money everywhere.
Wasn't even a battle here after all.
Yeah.
Geddy's boat tours.
Yeah.
And then offering the banana boat.
Yeah. But as you go up, and if you go by the Sedgwick Equestrian Monument and just look over to the west, you'll see a tree line just north of the Weichert farmhouse there. And there was a tree line there at the time, and it's very marshy. So that tree line is essentially taking out a big chunk of Sickles line where he can place artillery. There's no fields of fire in that area, and it's still marshy. And it slowly elevates as it goes up. So there's a substantial piece of that line that is not conducive for Sickles infantry or artillery to occupy. Having said that, I believe Meade says he can make adjustments within reason of the proposed line that I'm telling you about. I guess Sickles interprets that, well, within reason means we can go get some peaches. And that's what he does. So maybe within reason means something different to Sickles than Meade or anybody else that's out there.
But at minimum, right, the order was connect to the left of Hancock.
Around the
right?
Pennsylvania monument, yeah.
To me, that was an easy one. Yeah, going south from there, they said it gets ugly, right?
Yeah, and that's part of the problem. He detaches from the rest of the line.
Yeah.
The other thing he doesn't do is he has an engineer for a division commander who's got experience, and that's Humphreys. He doesn't consult with Humphreys at all.
Yeah.
And that's the guy, that's the professional soldier in his corps of a high rank that he can talk to. What should we do here? How are we going to alleviate this view shed in front of us that, prevents us from doing what we're supposed to do? And he doesn't do that.
Yeah.
Again, he plays games in my mind.
Yeah, I was out there the other day, same thing. So starting at the Pennsylvania Monument, going south, and ooh, not good, not good. But once you get on a little round top, you go, oh, wait a minute. I mean, like I said, I heard some podcast was one of these ones that I don't think he ever went up there. Because I think if you go up there, now you get a different view. I would think, hey, all right, I'm going to make this work somehow. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
But if you don't go up there, because like I was down below, like again, still north of the round top, there's Hawks Ridge blocking my view. There's all those trees blocking my view. And you can see why it's like, this is not good. But then you get up there and you're like, okay.
Yeah, the problem with his line is after you come off Little Round Top and start heading north, just past the Sedgwick Monument, look to your left, and that's the problem area. It's interesting that when they had the hearings in February, March of 1864, David Birney, one of his division commanders, is called before the congressional hearing, and he says, I occupied Little Round Top. No, you didn't. So, but that whole hearing is trying to get Meade replaced. Thankfully, they fail. But
well, everybody always talks about how bad that position was that Sickles was in to defend because he can't see. But it's also an awfully bad place to be attacked through. So you think of the Confederates, if they even had intended to attack through there, which they didn't anyway, that would have been that was terrible ground to attack over, which then gives the defense even more of an advantage. So that was one thing about that argument of Sickles moving up to get to where he had better ground. But yeah, you didn't have great ground here, but the attacking ground was terrible. Like to try to move a regiment through the woods and attack through all that area was not.
I've always wondered how he could mitigate that. If he occupies that line, how does he mitigate that one area? And I think you put a battery back towards the east where they can set up in that wood line where the modern day road goes up and just have them sitting there loaded with canister. If any Confederates come through that tree line into that muck, they're not moving very fast, and you just tear into them. You don't need any infantry in that spot. And if you do, apparently the New Jersey Brigade's behind you because you got a big monument
I
back
was going to say, the Confederates would have come through there and realized that people from New Jersey were there and said, the heck with that.
Yeah. Too many tolls. Yeah.
That's how we slow them down.
Yeah.
Too many tolls.
Yeah, charge them money to come through the woods and the swamp. Yeah. So, yeah. So,
It seems to me that even if he was playing games, instead of putting more to Devil's Den, you can put him on Little Round Top. Then you can legitimately say that you put somebody on Little Round Top. And it seems like, if you think you got the men to cover him out there, you now make it even a little bit of a tighter line by covering Little Round Top instead of Devil's Den. That still seems like, just the better spot. Even if you're playing games, then you can still say, hey, see, I did have Little Round Top covered. I had, there was somebody there, and it just seems like a better defensive spot.
Let me ask a question. I thought of a question.
Good.
Yeah.
Good. I like that.
Me thinking on the fly is pretty impressive.
I know. You're learning.
You write this down? Does Sickles moving out help the Army of the Potomac? Knowing what we know now, does it help the Army of the Potomac?
I think it's a mixed bag, because while they do cause Longstreet's attack to differentiate from the original plan and use up all the manpower and everything, the same thing's happening in the Army of the Potomac. They're using up all that manpower. Mm-hmm. So I think it's kind of a little bit
like
of
a wash there. Yeah.
Who can afford to use up manpower?
Yeah, they can afford it. So it actually does kind of work out to their advantage. Although I would say, by the end of the day, where's the Union line? Oh, it's basically roughly where
it was supposed to be.
Yeah. But it's back there. And what is the Confederates' loss to get it back there, though? Right. It's a different, even though it's back where it's supposed to be, it's a different situation now. They don't have near as many men as they did the day before.
So the Confederates took the ground from the Union, but it wasn't the ground they were after to begin with. So they wasted all those men and ammunition to get ground that was completely invaluable. Well, not completely, but
they were after the peach orchard a little bit.
Sure.
Yeah. That's the only thing they get that's worth it.
They were trying to roll up the,
But was the peach orchard even worth it? Because, once they get artillery on that platform, what did that artillery really do?
Well, it anchors the bombardment for the next day.
Right, but...
And at the time...
that was such a great...
At the time, it does a good job. Alexander moves forward, and he said that's the greatest dream of an artilleryman.
Right.
I was an artillery guy, and we never charged anything.
But
I didn't want to charge anything either.
Once he got there, he saw it, but then once he got there, he's like, oh, this wasn't as great as I thought it was.
Yeah, they were thinking it was going to be like Hazel Grove,
He thought that was the line. And once they break that line, he thinks the Confederacy is a thing.
Yeah.
And then he realizes, no, this isn't the line. So.
But if Sickles had been where he was supposed to be, he was still not where the Confederates didn't think they were there. So it's still whether he stayed where he was, move forward. He still disrupted their plans because he was there at that end, and they didn't believe.
And they would have had to go through swampy areas, and it wasn't like they would have just easily.
Well, and then when they end up going back, like he was saying, they end up being where they were, and a lot of the places Sickles said was not good for artillery. They
ended up being really good for artillery.
Yeah. There's a reason there wasn't like a brigade out in the middle there, of Confederates in front of the sunken road at Maurice Heights. To soften the blow. They're all back behind. Being defensive. No, hey, let's just put you out. You'll slow it down. It'll be a good thing. No, get back.
Get behind the wall. Good point.
You do have. I think one of the things on Sickles' mind is Hazel Grove at Chancellorsville. And he's looking at the peach orchard like that Hazel Grove, which the Confederates took and used against them there.
Trying to deprive them of that. Go ahead, Jeff.
I agree, because I've thought about that too. And then my two thoughts with this is Sickles moving forward. My thought is just within days prior to Gettysburg, Hooker's removed. Hooker was Sickles' guy.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And now you have a new commander that you already have tension with. Mm-hmm. And now I feel like Sickles going back and forth with displacement is a little bit of a CYA. Please just tell me this is where you want to be. I don't really like where I was. Can you just confirm that this is where you'd like me to be?
Right.
And, again, me just worried about the rights, so he's got a million other things on his mind. But Sickles going out to the peach orchard and an account after the war, and realizing they became friends. But Longstreet does credit Sickles' move out there as credit for helping, for him being destroyed.
Longstreet is a pure defensive.
I think that's easy because Meade's dead.
Yeah.
So,
That's good.
and
Longstreet.
But,
Artillery guy, Lewis, does Sickles moving out there negate the artillery on Cemetery Ridge? I mean, don't they have to wait till all the friendlies get back before they can effectively?
They do, but the Union Army has a bunch of artillery out there too, because that's what Meade promises. Once he goes out there about 3:30 and talks to Sickles, Sickles has his core artillery out there,
right,
and he tells him, "I will give you the support that you need to include artillery from the reserve artillery." You're right. When you've got infantry in front of you, although the modern artillery I was in, we never saw what we shot until we drove by it later on. That's one of I was in Desert Storm. Once we started shooting, we just shot and shot and shot, and we'd move and move and move. And 45 minutes later, you see this destroyed building with people laying around, and they would call over the radio, "That's what y'all hit 45 minutes ago." So we're firing so far from the targets in modern day artillery. It is different. In Civil War artillery, you do have to be cognizant of the troops in front of you. An example of that is George Winslow's battery in the wheat field. He's firing over the heads of the 17th Maine into Rose Woods at these Georgians coming at it. So, but to your point, Sickles does have artillery out there. He has a lot of artillery out there. All that artillery is going to be rolled back.
It just seems to me like on the 3rd, from the minute they stepped out of the woods, the Confederate, they were subject to getting hit by artillery all the way across.
Oh, yes. We talked about that today. The first artillery fired out of the Peach Orchard is when Longstreet's men are moving south. The Emmitsburg Road was here then, and they see them crossing the Emmitsburg Road, and I'm pretty sure it was Judson Clark's New Jersey battery, opens up on them about 3:30, and that response from the Confederates starts up. And Alexander says, after the war, that was the sharpest artillery duel, and he was through artillery hell at Antietam. He said that was the sharpest artillery duel he experienced during the war.
Okay. Sickles changes his story over time. He's going to change things here and there as he goes along.
They all do.
But one thing he doesn't say is that one of his motivations was because of Hazel Grove at Chancellorsville. He doesn't ever write that. He doesn't ever say that. It's something that we infer looking back and looking at his experience that this is something he would have factored into his thinking. So it's one of those things where, yes, we seeing the ground, we make the one-on-one connection, but we don't have the primary source documentation to back it up. The thing that is, going to your question there, Lewis, and it's great to answer a question rather than to ask a question, is I think I'm going with Steve on this. Steve, I don't know how you feel about that, but it's a bit of a mixed bag because the 3rd Corps, a venerable corps, a hard-fighting corps, they fight hard. And they suck a lot of that punch out of the Confederate attack. Over ground, the Confederates has no value to the Confederates at all. Like the wheat field, the Valley of Death, Devil's Den. None of that matters to them because they need to attack Cemetery Hill. And by delaying, it allows Meade to send reinforcements, the 5th Corps, the 2nd Corps, and when the 6th Corps arrives. So Meade is pulling resources. It works as good for the Army to a certain degree because it takes that punch out of the Confederate attack because Meade sends the reinforcements necessary to do so. Also, but it's a mixed bag because who else does he send? He sends the majority of the 12th Corps who are on Culp's Hill to go deal with this. Now, one of them goes and has a nice tour of Adams County and gets lost. One division does. The other division arrives too late to do much of anything in regards to heavy fighting.
But Lockwood's brigade.
Does. And they're a new addition to the 12th Corps.
Yep.
And so it's a mixed bag because that's going to cause some problems later on at the night of July 2nd when one brigade is left back on Culp's Hill only.
It's almost a fatal mistake.
It's almost a fatal
But almost doesn't get you a win.
So, but go ahead, Eric.
No, I was just gonna say, I've always looked at this, and every time I've had this discussion, it always turns into start talking about Little Round Top and Devil's Den. But in my mind, and now, I mean, I would say I agree with you, Mike and Steve, that I think it's a mixed bag, that it worked out well. It wasn't smart, you probably shouldn't have done it, but it worked out in their favor, you could argue that. But at the end of the day, and this is when you get into counterfactual and it gets much more difficult, if Sickles had lined up where he was supposed to, and we know those woods are there in front, he moves up because he can't see, right? They're lined up all the way down Cemetery Ridge. If the Confederates move across, line up perpendicular to the road like they're supposed to, and attack up the road, now when they break out past those woods, where are the Union at? On their flank and in their rear. Imagine how devastating that would have been to Longstreet's attack if Longstreet had lined up the way he said he was going to. These are all ifs. If he lined up the way he was ordered to line up and moved the way he was ordered to move,
right,
and Sickles had lined up where he was supposed to line up, now you've got this, and you're firing on a flank.
It's a reverse second Manassas.
But I think at some point, really quick, Longstreet would have adjusted that line.
And that's where you start getting
He would
into,
refuse that
there's
line.
lots of things that are going to change at that point.
Well, so one thing, when you encounter somebody who's only seen the movie, and what do they always say about this part?
Should have gone to the right.
Only they had let Hood go around to the right. So not to mock people like that, but to help those people, what do we tell them when they say that so matter-of-factly? Like, what do you say?
You're right. You're absolutely right.
You're absolutely right. You are so smart. No, but what have you ever? First of all, have you ever had that conversation before, and how did you handle it?
That's for 6 Corps.
What?
6
Corps.
6 Corps.
Yeah.
Okay.
And is there a farm lane? I mean, around, I guess.
For them to go build beneath? I think they'd have to go to like the Ridge Road or something, wouldn't they? Down to go see Cam.
Okay.
Down there, stop and see Cam, and then head north.
Ridge Road or
What's the reply that Lee gives later at the university when somebody says he should have done something like, young man, if only we'd have had you there.
Yeah. Kent, do you like coffee?
I love it.
Do you like Gettysburg?
I love it.
Well, you should try Little Ground Top, which is probably the greatest coffee ever to come out of Gettysburg, Pennsylvania. It's roasted right here. You know, Bantam Roasters down across from the Dobbin House on Steinmore Avenue? Sure. Well, this is where we get it from. They roast it. And you know, some days I go in there for my morning cup of coffee and there's smoke coming out of the smokestack. And I go and I get a big snort of it, and it smells like roasted coffee beans. Of course, it makes me cough, but it's also really delicious smelling, as this is too. You can smell it in here, right? Ken, it is probably something that has made more people happy in the last year since we've had it out than anything else. Including one of our listeners is a lottery winner, and he said when he had his first sip of this, it made him happier than when he won the lottery. So good for him, right?
Must be damn good.
It's fantastic. I'm telling you, it's like a winning lottery ticket in your mouth with every sip. So you can get it at Bantam Roasters down at 82 Steinmore Avenue here in Gettysburg, or going to addressinggettysburg.com/cafe. Here's a bag for you.
Thank you
Thank
very
you.
much.
You're very welcome.
It's been a pleasure.
It's always a pleasure. Thanks.
At Digital History Pioneers Foundation, we are about grassroots history on digital platforms. That means we are about podcasters, documentarians, YouTubers, and even TikTokers. All of these creators are out there trying to share their love of history with the public. They don't need ideas, they need funding, both from viewers and corporate donors. DH Pioneers' initial funding focus is on the Civil War era, with a special emphasis on the Addressing Gettysburg podcast. So be a vital part of the unique content Addressing Gettysburg has in store by donating at dhpioneers.com and help bring your love of history to the people. Digital History Pioneers is an IRS Section 501c3 approved charitable corporation that makes any donation tax deductible to the fullest extent of the law.
Well, I guess my point though, so for the sake of people who are new to everything and they've only seen the movie, the answer to they should have let Hood go around to the right is what? That you have the 6th Corps coming up, but right behind the Union line at the Spangler Farm, you have the 5th Corps.
Right.
And that's who's going to be coming up anyway to help Sickles. Yeah, you could have gone around to the right, but you would have turned Sickles facing to face south to meet that threat. And then the 5th Corps would have come in and swooped you in the flank. And then if you'd still been fighting for a while, eventually you would have been swallowed up in the rear by the 6th Corps. So that's why they couldn't go around to the right. Not that they knew that, right?
Yeah.
It's just that, yeah, okay.
Yeah.
So that's, because I know people just are new to it and they just watch the movie. And
so the Army, where we see the Army of Northern Virginia is noted for its bold moves. And so we see something like this and what Hood is writing after the war going around to the right. We see this as a bold move. The problem with that, it's detaching his division away from pretty much the rest of the attack. If he also brings McLaws with him, that's now 2 divisions. Even so, you're going to run into a lot of problems back there. You don't know what you're facing back there behind those round tops. That's what we're talking about here. And so the reality is it puts them more in jeopardy. But moreover, I tell people, it's not according to the orders. In an army, with an army commander who's notorious or famous, either how you put it, for doing discretionary orders, these orders are not discretionary. They're to use the Emmitsburg Road as a guide to find the left flank of the Union line and to envelop it. Those are the orders. You detach from and go around to the right, you're detaching yourself from the Emmitsburg Road. That's a departure from the orders. Longstreet saying no to Hood is Longstreet following Lee's orders.
And it's an unsupported attack. How can, if one division decides to go out around the mountain, where's the support? There's no way to support that attack.
Exactly.
It's fanciful and it's great for a movie.
And for practical purposes, by the time they do all that, it's going to be dark.
Yeah, exactly right.
Maybe he would have found Jeb Stuart sooner. If he'd have gone around to the right, he would have gone forward. It was wrong, Jeb Stuart. They connected up.
And then they attack from the rear. Their biggest charge.
Yeah, right.
Lewis, with Lee's original plan of going up Emmitsburg Road, Hood, he wants them perpendicular to Emmitsburg Road. How does Hood end up all the way to Big Round Top?
Oh.
He should have been much closer. Who gave that order, or was it just once they got there, Sickles was there and they just...
Yeah. So it's McLaw's division that's supposed to move up and get perpendicular to the road. Once McLaw's division gets down into that area and they see the 3rd Corps moved out, they're going to use Hood's division to extend the line because they're trying to get to the end. And to do that, you've got to continue south. And that's when Hood's division moves in and becomes the end of the line. So it's just Hood's down there because the line doesn't end at the Peach Orchard or back east from that on Cemetery Ridge. It ends, it takes off towards Devil's Den. Hood's got to move down and look for that end.
And then they start chasing sharpshooters through. Then it just keeps
We talked about that today. You missed it.
Yeah, Eric.
We chased it.
I'm going to have you give me that for a person.
So, all right. So, obviously, Little Round Top's part of this day, and it's the most important prominence on the battlefield, most important hill, right?
No.
With what? What do you mean? No.
Culp's Hill.
This audience doesn't know what they're talking about. The movie told me that it was the most important hill. The whole United States would have fallen if Joshua Jesus Chamberlain didn't save the day. Isn't that correct? Yeah, he does. He does.
I think I read that, yeah.
All right, but seriously, though, the most important hill is what? Culp's Hill. Okay. But we never hear about Culp's Hill a lot. But now we do. It doesn't have a Chamberlain, it doesn't have a view unless you go and have a coronary getting to the top of the tower, right?
Do that in wintertime. Yeah. And there's no
Wintertime is the best time to go.
Yeah. You could still have a heart attack in the winter.
I walked it on New Year's Eve because I come up here and wander around. on only approved paths by the Park Service. And I climbed that tower and I got up there and I had to stay up there for 3 days to recuperate. And then I came back down and went on home. But if you go up there in the wintertime, you can see a lot. It's neat looking up there. So it's worth it once if you've never been up there. But.
So, okay. So reasons why Culp's Hill is actually the important hill. Anybody?
So, although the gemstone of all this is Cemetery Hill, right? So
right.
Culp's Hill was right behind.
Well, yeah.
So if you take that, then you've got the key to the kingdom.
Yeah. Why is it the key to the kingdom?
Culp's Hill has access to the Baltimore Pike.
Right.
Yes, that's exactly right.
Yep.
And that's important. Why?
Because that's the main avenue of resupply and retreat for the Army of the Potomac.
Oh, that makes sense.
The fire tower's at the top, so you can get up there and see everything.
All right, yeah. So Culp's Hill, thoughts? Anything on that you guys want to get into? We got George Sears Green is up there all by his lonesome.
Right.
1,400 men, something like that?
About 1,300, yeah.
About 1,300 men. And he's got to hold, right? That wasn't originally they were going to remove the entire 12th Corps.
Yes.
And leave nothing.
Yeah.
But then they were convinced, okay, and then it means like, fine, leave a brigade.
There, yeah.
So he leaves a brigade and it's screened.
Little did he know how important that decision was.
Yeah. Because there's nothing going on. What's the Confederate plan on the right, the Union right?
Lee writes after his second official report, which is more detailed than the first. He wants Ewell, the attack is supposed to open up on the Confederate right against the Union left. Ewell's responsibility, when this attack opens up, he tells Ewell, make a demonstration and take advantage of any opportunity that you are afforded to attack. And so I mentioned this morning for those that were on our tour, how the roles of the two wings of the Confederate Army get flip-flopped, and this is just in my mind. The main attack is supposed to come from the Confederate right. Whether they drive up the road or not, that's the main attack on the Confederate right. In military parlance, modern military parlance, the Confederate left is supposed to act as a fixing force. They are supposed to fix the Union forces in place where they can't do anything but stay there. And that allows, in a perfect world, it prevents reinforcements to be sent to another area to reinforce, and hopefully you break through that other area and you concentrate a larger force on the other area, that area in this instance being the right flank of the Confederate Army. What happens is they attack, the right flank does, Longstreet. They start hitting all these useless places tactically based on what their overall objective is, and they don't get too far. And they start drawing reinforcements from the other side. They become the fixing force. And when Ewell does attack, that if they have more troops and throw more weight, there's their opportunity. Because unbeknownst to them, Meade has pulled 2/3 of the force he has over there off of that hill and sent them to the south. And there's their golden opportunity. What helps the Union Army is they built the breastworks all day long, not all day, they're finished about noon, and it's dark. And the Confederates are coming uphill. Mm-hmm. And they use all the troops they have available at the moment. And when at the lower Culp's Hill, when they move up, occupy those breastworks, they realize nothing's in front of them. They don't know that the Baltimore Pike's in front of them. They start getting fire from their right. What do? They turn to the right because that's who's shooting at them. But instead of Ewell's Corps being the fixing force, it ends up being Longstreet's Corps. He's fixing the Union Army down there and drawing in more resources from the Union Army. In the main attack, the chance for success ends up being in front of Ewell's Corps.
Did Ewell attack when he was supposed to, or I mean, he was supposed to go when Longstreet started.
He does what he's supposed to do, and this is not original thought for me. This is Charlie Fennell. What he does exactly what he's supposed to do. Longstreet opens up about 4 o'clock. Ewell opens up with his artillery. That's how he's going to demonstrate the artillery on Benner's Hill. So he opens up.
Rick, I'm sorry, but Ewell's orders are to demonstrate, not to attack, unless
an opportunity
arises. Right.
Yeah.
So I was just going to say that.
The opportunity presents itself. He sends, his artillery gets tore up.
Right.
And so he goes forward with the infantry. And Charlie Fennell makes this point on when he talks about Culp's Hill. If he only waits a little bit longer, maybe 30 minutes, there's going to be nobody there.
Yeah.
And he's going to go up there because that's how Greene's brigade gets left there. He realizes the picket line is coming in. And if they're falling back, they're being driven back. Somebody says, hey, the Confederates are coming. We got to keep somebody here. If Ewell waits and doesn't drive those pickets in and the alarm's not sounded, maybe Greene gets sent to the other side of the line and there's nobody there.
Right.
And look at this hill we got all of a sudden. Man, isn't this great? They got a tower built for us? We can see the whole battlefield. Tell Lee.
So do you think that the fact that Ewell's order was to demonstrate and not attack kind of helped the Union because there was a delay there? Because the attack on Culp's Hill doesn't start till later. As everything's winding down on the Union left.
Yeah, but I think if he waits even longer and doesn't drive that picket line in, like Charlie says, and alert that one brigade, hey, there's Confederates coming this way. We need to stay here. If they wait and they don't think Confederates are coming, they leave, then the hill's empty. The only advantage they have is the majority of the troops leave the hill. The majority of those troops, though, don't have an effect on the other side of the field because they get lost. Lockwood's brigade is the only one that goes into the neighborhood of just south of Willard's brigade. They're the only ones that go into any action over there. The rest of them head down to the Baltimore Pike, down to further down, they cross Rock Creek. So it doesn't have an effect on the Union left, these troops that are sent over there for the most part. So I think if Ewell waits in hindsight, what we know now, and the Union Army doesn't realize that they're coming, maybe they all leave. I think Ewell does exactly as he's ordered.
But didn't he do a poor job of demonstrating that? If the Union pulled all those troops off, didn't keep them in place. I know you said they pulled them off and then didn't have them on the other end.
He's demonstrating with artillery rather than sending the full-scale infantry. That's his demonstration.
Right.
And I can't fault him for that.
The Union troops, though. I mean, right? Because they won elections, right?
That's true. Yeah. But it turns out they didn't have much of an effect on one side. Yeah. Yeah.
And not only that, but shifting over to the next hill, I mean, Hayes and Avery almost break through on East Cemetery Hill.
They do. The problem is there's no depth in that attack. The one thing Longstreet does well is he attacks in depth. In my view, what he doesn't do well, he holds back the subsequent brigades too long. Kershaw and then Barksdale, because he's with Barksdale. Kershaw writes that he rides with Kershaw out to the Emmitsburg Road, leaves him and goes presumably to Barksdale. If he sends them in sooner, they break the Peach Orchard line sooner, and everything maybe changes. Right. Instead, the artillery sitting in the Peach Orchard is just devastating to Kershaw because they're still there. They don't get moved out till Barksdale. I don't know why I got to that point, but I forgot your question.
Oh no, I was just saying how Early's attack up East Cemetery.
Oh yeah. They don't have depth.
And then they're also expecting. I think Hayes puts in his report support from the front, meaning Rhodes's division. But Rhodes is staring down the barrels of how many artillery pieces.
Yeah, and I don't blame him for not going. I really don't. And then the other point is, because things have died down, the problem with the Confederate, in my view, the problem with the Confederate attack as it moves up the line from Longstreet to AP Hill and keeps moving, Dorsey Pender gets mortally wounded early on, and Cornet Posey's brigade gets caught up around the Bliss farm. One regiment of Mississippians keeps on to Ambrose Wright's left. The rest of them are still hanging out at the Bliss farm, squabbling over that. That's where it all peters out. Right. And then because it peters out, Hancock's able to grab a brigade and send them over to help out. And they help beat back Hayes. So that, and the Confederates don't have any artillery support at that point. It's been ate up, and you've got the battery right there at Stevens Knoll just tearing into them. They can't see them because it's dark, but they see shadows. And the commander it's not Stevens because he's wounded on the first day. The commander who takes over, we call it zeroing your guns. You zero your guns. You see what it takes to hit point A, what the range is, and what elevation. That commander does that during the day. So even when it gets dark, he knows what to set his cannon at to hit certain points. And they see these shadows coming across Avery's North Carolinians, and he's able to tear into them. And nothing you can do.
That had to be a nightmare, being an Avery Smith.
Yeah, it was a nightmare for Avery.
Yeah.
He wrote the famous, he's mortally wounded out there. He gets a piece of paper and a pencil out and writes on it, "Tell my father I died with my face to the enemy." And that piece of paper, I guess, is still down at the Museum of the Civil War down in Richmond.
But again, because of the darkness, we don't really know if his face was to the enemy.
We're going to say it was. Wow. Yeah.
The people who were dragged here, what are you thinking so far?
When the hell does this end? God damn it.
What's for dinner? Right?
Where are we
going to eat?
Where are we going for dinner?
Where's Reynolds? What's that?
Where's Reynolds?
Yeah, where's Reynolds?
Philadelphia.
He's dead.
He's in a box on his way.
By the way, we have a
Lincoln.
descendant of Reynolds right here, right? Descendant, relative,
Ancestor, yeah.
sort of.
Cousin.
32nd cousin or something like that?
Cousin 5 generations.
5 generations.
You still wondering about Kate Hewitt too?
Nah, it's
Okay, you saw that. Good for you.
Yeah. All right, so you're thinking about food. How about you in the back there, ma'am? Are you engrossed in this? No?
It's very interesting.
It is interesting. Good. Okay, I'm glad. I just don't want you to get bored. That's all. All right,
We're
so
entertaining people.
Yeah,
Why don't
we
we
try.
talk about Buster Kilrain?
We could get Court to play another song in his palms.
Lewis brought up about.
Thank you for bringing it back to adult conversation.
Go
ahead.
Keep you on track,
The audience talked a lot more last week.
Oh, you're not happy with the audience?
I'm just saying they talked a lot
I guess this
more.
could be open to the audience. So, what's the bigger casualty in terms of division commanders for the Confederates on day 2? Is it Hood, or is it at the beginning, or Pender at the end? Which one's going to have a bigger impact?
This is interesting. Back before I wasn't a guide, but I was into Gettysburg, not necessarily knowing about guides. I never met a guide until I showed up to take the written test. I didn't know any guy. I didn't know anybody. And I didn't personally meet anybody until Tier 3 when they assigned Rob Abbott to be my mentor. And again, I publicly give him credit. That's why I'm a guy today. I had this colonel yelling at me, and that's what I needed. But I wrote this paper. Somehow the college people let me get away with it. They had no clue what I was talking about. That's why I did good. I first wrote that the wounding of Dorsey Pender was the moment the battle turned for the Confederates, because that's when it peters out.
Right.
Yeah.
And he was a good division commander. And once he goes down, there is no guiding hand because the AP Hill's absent doing whatever. Nobody really knows, I don't think. And then once that division commander is taken out of action, it just dies. Subsequent to that, since I've become a guide and studied a lot more, I narrow it down to the action around the Bliss farm. I think that is where it dies, because if they keep coming, whether, Wright's brigade gets to the top of the mountain or not, whatever mountain he sees, who knows where he's at, but they get to the line.
They're close.
Yeah, they get there. There's a black plaque right there, and they wouldn't lie to us. They get there. And if there's subsequent pressure to Wright's left that is coming forward, it keeps a bunch of people there. Who knows what you can accomplish there? And Carroll's brigade is not able to be sent over to knock out that line. With Hood's wounding, it is problematic, but you still got competent brigade commanders attacking still. Like I discussed today, Law's problem isn't Hood's not there. I think Law's problem is they walk so far without water.
Right.
And too many of them, to including the colonel of the 47th Alabama, falls out, and that particular regiment loses command and control. But they're attacking. Robertson's brigade's attacking, and again, Longstreet's attacking in depth. You've got Benning's brigade coming behind them and Anderson's brigade coming behind them, and that's how they're able to break through and knock out the Union force down there. Somebody brought it up. The problem is that's useless ground. It doesn't help the Confederates advance to their objective, which is 1.5 miles north of there. It's Cemetery Hill. They become a fixing force. So, good question.
Any thoughts, or statements, non-questions? Your ideas, your own analysis of...
you can tell me I'm wrong.
You can also tell Lewis he's wrong. We'd love to hear that.
Why was the Bliss farm so different? I know there was some fighting over it, but like you said, it seemed to stop there. And I'm glad you brought that up. That was actually one of the topics I wanted to talk about. But it's kind of, there were a bunch of other barns and farms on the battlefield that maybe Kershaw had a little problem, but they got around it and then got going again. Why?
Location. Mm-hmm. Confederates can get up to that barn in the house, getting the upper floors, and snipe at the Union line, particularly artillerymen. Artillerymen can't operate a gun sitting down behind a wall. They're standing up, they're vulnerable. So you've got Confederates up there sniping away at the Union force, and that's why they squabble over it. And finally, on the 3rd, the Union Army burns it down to get rid of the problem. But it's the location and what the Confederates are doing throughout the 2nd. They're sniping at the Union Army up on Cemetery Ridge, particularly at artillerymen, I think.
That's what I was talking about. Why did the Confederates seem to have such a problem then? Why did it break them up, that attack?
Oh, because they're still stuck there. They're not moving forward. They don't have the guiding hand for whatever reason. That guiding hand to keep them, to tell Posey, forget the barn, go forward, would have been Dorsey Pender. And he gets taken out. Nobody fills that void above Dorsey Pender, in my view.
So along that line, R.H. Anderson, under Longstreet's command up until reorganization,
yep.
really kind of gets, in my opinion, a pass on all this. I mean, no one knows where A.P. Hill is. I mean, people talk about that today. But why do we not throw Anderson on the bus? Because he is in control of those 5 brigades. He's supposed to be in control of those 5 brigades. It doesn't seem to be.
I think, and this is just my opinion, 3 of his brigades do really well for what they're asked to do. Wilcox, Lang, and Wright. They go forward and they fight hard and they almost get to where they're supposed to get. And if they don't get halfway across the field, then we're probably being a little more...
Does Mahone get a pass in 63 because of what he is able to accomplish in 64 and 65?
I don't know if he gets a pass. He's not talked about because he doesn't do anything, and we sort of gloss over the fact that he doesn't do anything. He just says, yeah, I'm not going nowhere. I kind of like it here. Here they're going to be able to putt-putt nearby. I want to play. I didn't know that was there until yesterday.
Oh, really?
I had no idea. I said, what is this waterfall over here? And look at there.
Should go in for a couple of rounds.
No, it's too open.
Too open.
I like the ones that got trees around.
Oh.
It's just green and they're...
Well, give them a minute. They just
no windmills and stuff like that.
Still. Yeah. Oh, I see.
If we think of like the Confederate attack there late in the day on that side of the battlefield as being like falling dominoes, with each brigade being a falling domino, it's like Posey's brigade is that domino that falls out of place.
Either that or it goes down just a little bit, not all the way.
Yeah, exactly. And it doesn't knock the other ones down. It just goes off kilter, and that's what happens. I don't know how William Dorsey Pender would have alleviated that, because the next brigade in line after Posey is Mahone. That's Anderson's brigade in his division. And there's that going back and forth between staff officer to Mahone, and is Anderson ordering me to do this, and back and forth. But also we have to factor into the account here, it's late in the day. Yes, we'll make a big deal of the night fighting on Culp's Hill and East Cemetery Hill, but we're also getting to that really, daylight is fading there. And so daylight is also the enemy of the Confederates at this point as well. So William Dorsey Pender going down is bad. It is bad because he's an aggressive division commander. And also Douglas Southall Freeman's Civil War man crush. but I love Steve Wagner back. Anyway.
Woke him up.
but the reality is, I don't know if he could have gotten Mahone moving, Pender. Don't know. He could have moved his men forward, but he's also dealing with problems of his own. He's still got Orland Smith's brigade in front of him, skirmishing with his soldiers there on Smith's Ridge. So there's a lot going on here, and then daylight's fading. I don't know how much influence William Dorsey Pender would have had, even if he wasn't wounded.
Well, speaking of influence, at this point in time, now, certainly D.H. Hill was whether or not he was attached to Longstreet completely or whether, and I know there's some debate on who he's technically under there, but where's A.P. Hill? And I don't know the answer to this, so I'm going to ask this. Where's Lee at? This is not far from where Lee set up for the day, where he came out and did his reconnaissance and said, we're going to attack. This is how we're going to attack. This is the area that they talk about. They talk about Pendleton doing reconnaissance. This is where Pendleton did his, so this is where the upper echelon of leadership is at. A.P. Hill was still getting over the one night stand he had in New York City 20 years ago, somewhere in a tent. But those guys have all gone missing. So those are people that, even though that attack is under Longstreet, could have at least pushed some influence into it. So when you start moving that far up the line, away from where your leadership of Longstreet is, somebody else could have done something. So
maybe Lee was in the outhouse.
He might have been.
If we're going to give A.P. Hill a pass for his youthful indiscretions, then Lee's got diarrhea. So why maybe he's in the outhouse? It sounds stupid when I say that, but it's so true. It's such a real thing.
And I don't know.
Drinking buttermilk in the summer sounds pretty stupid.
And I don't.
Milk was a bad choice.
I might be wrong in this, but I don't know. I know in 1864, there are times that Lee grabs a regiment or a brigade and goes with them. Before that point, when things get desperate, beginning in May of 1864, I don't know of any instance prior to that where he was doing that. He was going down to that point in operational command and saying, we need to do that. He's still the laissez-faire commander up here. This is what I want y'all to do. Figure it out and do it.
Well, he didn't have to before because he had Longstreet and Jackson.
Yeah, and I made this point on one of our shows with Matt. The difference between Longstreet and Jackson is Jackson doesn't argue. Now, that doesn't mean Jackson is the end-all, be-all, because he does horrible on the peninsula. But Jackson works effectively when he's by himself. When he's with Lee, though, he doesn't really argue. He's not obstinate like Longstreet is. Longstreet's the opposite. He doesn't seem to work well by himself. Yeah, I mean, the Suffolk campaign is not that great during the Chancellorsville campaign. And so, you know, you're right. He doesn't have these two, but still, he doesn't come down to that operational level that I know of. And I could be wrong. There could be instances, and I just can't think of them, until 1864. That's when he starts getting into the weeds because things are desperate at that point. And he thinks this is what I got to do to save this particular day. And that's when he jumps out in front and they say, lead to the rear and all that mess.
Well, I think that's where that's where I would argue some of Lee's weakness is not being able to see that. Something we talked about yesterday. It feels like it was a week ago, but it was yesterday. We talked about that change in upper command structure and Lee not adjusting yet.
Yep.
Lee not adjusting from the I'm going to give you what my intention is and you go fulfill it, to now he has two leaders that were in A.P. Hill and Ewell who are used to having Jackson, telling them you will get up at this time, you're going to brush your teeth, and then you're going to go to the bathroom, and then and telling them step by step what they're going to do. Lee doesn't do it that way. They're used to hearing that, and so there's just delay. They haven't learned yet how to work together.
And there's no time in between their appointment and this battle.
But just to push back on that, though, but yet he directs McLaws how to deploy his division and over Longstreet's objections.
I think emotions get in the way at that point. I think him and Longstreet are getting a little hot under the collar.
And I was wondering, could that relate to McLaus's performance at Chancellorsville, where he was separate from Longstreet and Lee had to deal with him, and then it kind of
that's why people speculate he wasn't elevated to corps command. Give it to the Virginians.
Well, if you listen to Longstreet, Lee told Longstreet, McLaws is your problem. Don't let him screw up. If he does screw up, I'm going to take it out on you. And you better go and watch everything that McLaws does. So Lee had an issue with McLaws. If you believe Longstreet, you believe Southern Post.
I'm against blaming Longstreet for the loss, but later in the war, and I didn't mention this morning, like Longstreet has problems with a lot of people. McLaws being one of them, Evander Law, Robertson. He brings them all up on charges later in the war and tries to get them booted after they get sent out west. When Longstreet starts to write, he's writing on the defensive because everybody's accusing him of losing the biggest battle of the war and presumably losing the Confederacy. And when he's writing on the defensive, I think his writing gets jaded, and he's going to do whatever he can to take the blame, whatever blame he shoulders. And this is my excuse, and whether it's a valid excuse or not. So I give him I do not blame him for anything. Once he's in the fight here, he is the most active corps commander. Having said that, Ewell does what he's instructed to do to a T. But after this, he's very jaded. And that's when I don't turn against Longstreet, but I want to say, come on, man, shut up. Just shut up. Just be quiet. Yeah. So I don't put him on the pedestal that some pro enthusiast, Longstreet enthusiasts do these days, because it seems like, the pendulum is starting to go way over here. Oh, this guy's great. He was a good corps commander. He really was. And he was the most experienced corps commander that Lee has after Stonewall goes down. But there's differences between those two. And sometimes, Longstreet is just too obstinate. Rather than say, you can say, I don't think this attack's that great. We ought to think of something else. Once Lee says, no, this is what we're going to do. Yes, sir. And you go do it to the best of your ability. I think he stays obstinate for too long on that particular day. And Lee lets him do it. Lee lets him wait on Evander Law. So Lee's, in my mind, Lee's overall to blame why they lose the battle. The buck stops here. And I'm a Lee enthusiast.
And
Just go look at my car.
Lee even says it's his fault.
Yeah.
Not to spoil the ending.
Yeah. And that's one reason I appreciate Lee. He's willing to say that. He's a gentleman. Right. My tag says so.
We spent a lot of time talking about McLaw's Law, the Confederate advance on the Peach Orchard and on that side. And I'm sitting here thinking, you've got a lot of moving parts there. You've got Culp's Hills guys coming down. You've got the Third Corps gets obliterated. And in my head, I'm thinking all the challenges that the Union side has of all of these mishmash of corps are all coming together. And the challenge of now repelling the Confederates as they're moving forward. In my head, I'm trying to think of like a difficult decision. If I may have this wrong, was it not Hancock that had to take over Sickles' Third Corps after Sickles went down? And we're sitting here talking about if this person went down and we're all these commanders, and I'm trying to think of a challenge of how Hancock is being attacked, and now in his head he's got to be thinking, here I am again having to come save a day and get all these new corps together to formulate some kind of repulse of the Confederates as they're coming through. It's not really a question there per se. I'm just kind of thinking to myself, we've spent a lot of time talking about the Confederates.
Yeah, as soon as you started talking, that was the first thought in my mind. We've spent an hour and a half on the Confederates, and I like your points. I will pose a question. And if you're sitting here thinking you don't know a lot about the battle, so you don't want to open up your mouth, please open up your mouth. What do we think of the Union performance on July 2nd?
Oh, outstanding. Holy smokes.
Outstanding, says Michael Lentz.
Anybody else?
Well, I'll counter that a little bit. To your point, like who was in charge over there in the Peach Orchard? Because like one point, did you have Caldwell asking for support? Like he didn't know who to ask, or he would ask for help, and they're like, "Who are you?" or kind of thing, right? Or I'm not under your
So
control.
like there was
right
no
now.
overall control
There
of
was
that
no
portion
overall
of the
control.
field.
Sykes is just like he kind of disappears only because like his guys are just being piecemealed out, right?
Right.
So what role is he playing? Like I said, when Hancock takes over, are people coming to him?
It's a good question though. There is no overall commander in that area.
That's one of the things about the wheat field. There's
Did Meade go
nobody.
down to that battlefield?
Say that again.
Did Meade go down there? Wasn't he down there pretty much engaged?
He goes down there around 3:30 when it all starts to break loose with the artillery, and then I'm sure he leaves. At one point, he's, well, that's on the third day. He gets up to Little Round Top. I think Meade is sort of all over the place.
Yeah, that's
He's putting out fires.
Yeah.
I like your hat, by the way.
And well, I was going to say I was a scout platoon leader with First Cav,
There
First
you
Line, First Cav, First Armored Division. You were shooting over our heads probably, so
Probably,
appreciate
yeah.
that.
Yeah. I wasn't in the 82nd, but I was airborne. First 39th, 18th Airborne Corps. I won't tell you how I got into that unit, but it was 155 towed artillery. And for some dumb reason, we threw them out of planes. The gun would survive, but the prime mover, a 5-ton truck, would not. So you're stuck on a drop zone with a gun that you can't move. There's no horses around either. So we get to Desert Storm because we can fire further than the 82nd. We shoot up all their targets, and we're rolling by them. They're sitting on the side of the road. We wave at them and stuff. So I say all that to say, not every airborne unit is the 82nd. They get all the publicity, but there's other. I was a jump master, hardest school until I took the guy test that I've ever been to. But yeah, Meade is all over the place. There is no controlling hand in the wheat field. The wheat field is the only place where the Union Army launches a division-size attack. And that is Caldwell's division. And they do good until they're not.
So it kind of seems to me like if I'm the Union and if the Confederacy wanted to stay in the wheat field, I'll send all the men that, send them all there. If you want to stay there and fight, here's what we're worried about. Up here on Cemetery Hill and that sort of thing, that's the objective. Yeah, you want to stay down here and fight over this ground? Sure, I'll send you, what like Sherman said later, we'll send you lunch. Here's ammunition, keep fighting down there,
Well, I think they keep feeding people down there because if the Confederates can break through quickly, they can move in behind Cemetery Ridge. I mean, Cemetery Ridge comes off a Little Round Top. You come through the wheat field and keep going to the northeast, you're suddenly behind Hancock's line if you keep heading that way. So they're feeding people in there to keep them down there. I don't think they're thinking like you are. I understand your point, but they're just trying to keep the Confederates at bay. And that assault down there, like Longstreet writes, and I've said my piece on him, but he writes that's the hardest 2 hours fighting of any troops he'd ever seen. And I believe him.
And jumping off of Kevin's point over here, I think when I say outstanding, it's outstanding because decisions are being made at the division, brigade, even regimental level, that these commanders are making these decisions, and they're oftentimes making the right ones, the correct ones, as it plays out. But also we can't lose sight of the fact that the regular fighting soldier of the Army of the Potomac is not running away. They're fighting as hard as they possibly can wherever there's fighting to be had. And so it's a little bit of a mixed bag here as far as commanders, who's more responsible for victory, the commanders or the men. I tend to go with the men, but yes, the men hold. And in a series of counterattacks, I call it day 2 for the Army of the Potomac, it's New Yorkers coming out of nowhere, because it seems like New Yorkers are inserting themselves in crucial points. Whether you're talking about O'Rourke on the Round Top, whether you're talking about Willard down there on Cemetery Ridge.
Ireland?
Yeah, you're talking about the Brooklyn boys coming in to help out Greene. So these decisions are being made not necessarily at the Army or Corps level, but a lot of these decisions are being made down there at that lower level that are huge
Yeah.
for the Army.
I will say this: me and Richard, Orioles fans, we don't like Yankees. Hey, man, out of all the teams, we hate Yankees. So.
I think that's where this comes down to. I think looking at Hancock and what he's doing and the decisions he's making, he's launching these attacks. He's sending in the 1st Minnesota. He's sending in the 111th New York. He's talking to Hayes, his division commander, and saying, give me a brigade. And that's where Willard comes in.
Yep.
So it's a lot of series of different decisions being made that are crucial to how this plays out.
I think he's missing another one to throw a little shout out to the artillery, McGilvery.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
McGilvery. I mean,
absolutely.
He's an unsung hero.
Like, I mean, I think he's my MVP for day 2, I think.
So don't get ahead of us. Okay?
I'm just saying.
No, so McGilvery, why though? Go into why.
I mean, just like he's another person who seems to be here, there, and everywhere. And I mean, when he gets that line set up after the Emmitsburg Road line breaks, I mean, you can argue there's nothing left except his line.
Yeah.
And there they are waiting for him.
Yep. He set up that line. Go ahead, Rich.
I think another one, Dr. Jen Murray, she
wasn't there.
She wasn't there. But she does a day 2 on Meade. You were talking about Meade. We're all focused about, where's AP Hill, where's Lee. Meade, once things go off the rails, he's in the saddle. He's everywhere. He ends up at one point to the left of Gibbon, and it's only George Gordon Meade and his staff, and Wright is coming near him. And he keeps looking back because he's called for Newton to bring some of the First Corps boys over. And he keeps looking back and he keeps looking back. And nobody's yelling George Meade to the rear. And there's actually an account that they say he stands up in his stirrups and he puts his hand on his sword. Like him or hate him, I think, when you're the Army commander and you're there at that moment, that's a big deal. And I think his decision, fast forward later in the night, he tells Halleck, I'm staying.
Yeah.
I don't know if it's going to be offensive or defensive tomorrow, but we're staying. And then he has the Council of War.
Yeah.
I
think Meade does an outstanding job.
Could you speak to, again, I think it's a very interesting point building on that. The thought process seems to be the Council of War is very organized, but almost the way the picture is being painted, are they sitting there at that Council of War almost like a fighter that's been on the ropes? And do they realize how close things have gone? Or do they not realize how close things have gone against them? Like what's your thoughts as far as the actual meeting at Meade's headquarters on that?
I think they do realize it's close because the Confederates are on your right and they're occupying Lower Culp Hill. And they know that. They're planning on driving them out at dawn. I don't have any written record of this, but I think Meade has already made up his mind, but he wants validation. Yeah. And he wants validation from everybody that can stay awake in that house because Warren goes to sleep. And so I think Meade is well aware of how close, but he also knows how well his men have fought. And it's different from the other battles, the other previous battles that he's been a part of or witnessed.
And is there anyone else, I'd say this because I don't want to be critical, is there anyone else that Meade feels he can depend on the night of July 2nd besides Hancock? Reynolds is dead. The relationship with Sickles, we know that Sickles has at least been aggressive. He's out. I mean, is he going to count on Sykes? Is he going to count on Sedgwick? Is he going to count on just...
I think he can. I think he can count on Sedgwick. Sedgwick is steady. Other than the first day when Slocum doesn't want to take command because he's afraid of blame, I think he can count on him. And to a certain point, he can probably, in his mind, he can probably count on Howard. Howard's the victim of bad luck and, an ill-gotten reputation with his corps. So I do think he can count on them. The guy he can't count on is gone. And he's getting ready to head back to D.C. July 5th, he's talking to President Lincoln. That's when he starts spreading the lie. So I think the guy that he can't count on is out of here. I think he feels he can count on the rest, though.
And it goes back to, again, looking at that, I agree that Hancock, by nature of the Second Corps being where it is in the proximity. He's in that area. So are you going to pull Sedgwick out of his reserve area to come out and take command? No, Hancock already is seeing what's in front of him. So if you order Hancock to go in there and insert himself, he can because he knows the situation. So it's both a trust and proximity issue with Meade and Hancock there. It's Hancock's finest time on the battlefield in the war, in my opinion, for sure.
Yeah.
And so it's a great call to rely on Hancock to do that. I think looking at the Council of War, Hancock is also there with a meeting between Meade and George Sharp. And George Sharp recounts, based on the information he's collected, this George Sharp being the head of the Bureau of Military Information, basically the intelligence service for the Army of the Potomac at this point, recounts that they've had soldiers from every one of Lee's divisions.
Except one.
Except Pickett.
Yeah.
And that's when Hancock springs off the bed and goes, "We have them nicked." Don't know why he didn't say licked, but we have them nicked. And so that happened, according to historiography, before the council.
Yeah.
So there's already that.
And it's like, it goes back to Rich's point.
Well, and there's one other thing, Mike, that I'm recalling right now. Ulrich Dahlgren.
Yeah. Yes. Capturing.
He intercepts a message from Richmond to Lee. We have no one to send you.
In Greencastle.
In Greencastle, yeah.
And I get it over to Meade's headquarters.
You got the smartest audience.
I know.
You really do.
I know.
And I'm not just saying it to be saying it.
And
you got a smart
They
audience.
weren't until they started listening to the podcast.
None of us were.
No.
But some of us have listened more than others. All right. I can't remember yesterday. How am I going to remember all this?
I think the Council of War also, not so much as a decision-making process, but as getting everybody on the same page and everybody understanding the status of the Army.
Yeah.
That's what was lacking on the other side.
Yeah.
Ewell didn't know what Hill was doing, who didn't know what Longstreet was doing, and Lee was out of communication.
Yeah, there's no cohesion, it seemed like.
It also must be stated, this is also unusual for the Army of the Potomac, because you think of the command styles of Hooker, Burnside, and McClellan.
Right.
Did they make an attempt to make sure everyone was on the same page? Certainly Hooker didn't. He didn't give all his information to all his commanders. He held that meeting at Chancellorsville, and Reynolds quite famously gave the response of basically 19th century equivalent. This meeting could have been an email.
Right.
Okay.
You won't be up for this.
And so what you see is that at least Meade is trying to depart from that culture that has developed about mistrust between the commanders and the commanding officer of the Army, and saying, I need buy-in from these guys.
Although I will say this, and I may be wrong, I don't know of any other Union commander that takes command and 3 days later starts a major fight.
Yeah.
Happens to be the biggest of the war.
Yes.
So I think that plays into it too.
Absolutely.
It's almost like
timing.
Say.
The timing. But like I said, I think he already has his mind made up and he wants validation.
And besides Sickles, though, all the other corps commanders were happy to have him in command, by all counts.
Yeah, he's an unknown to the men, most of the men, other than the 5th Corps. But yeah,
the Corps
because he's
commanders-
steady.
Yeah.
And Lee says he's steady. He's not going to make a mistake, but if I make a mistake, he's going to make me pay for it.
Yeah.
And how fortuitous that was.
All right, now we have to, I see a lot of squirming, and Rob's back there giving me a very rude sign with his fingers. And so we have to start wrapping it up. But Steve had kind of alluded to, sorry, Rob, he wasn't really doing Now I am, he says. Yeah. Sorry, Rob.
One fingered salute, Matt.
Yeah.
Rob.
Anyway, so MVP, this is what we did at the end of the first one, and Jim Pangburn almost killed me. But everybody, I guess, said Buford, and I forget what it was that upset him. But
Buford, Howard,
Don't make me pick just one. Just
oh, is that what it was? Yeah. But you have to pick just one because it's most valuable, not of value.
I think you should start back there and worm your way this way.
All right, let's do that. Let's start over there in the corner. What is your name, sir?
Dan.
Dan. I thought so.
Yeah, I would say George Green.
George Green. I like that. Yes, sir.
Chris, anybody on YouTube might know me as Ty Webb.
Ty Webb, the great Ty Webb.
Thank you. Yes, mediocre Ty Webb. I already told you that.
Sorry. Mediocre Ty Webb. Yeah.
I'm going to go within green and go David Ireland.
David Ireland. I like that, sir.
I'm Mike, and I would go with green also, yeah.
Yeah, okay. Ma'am?
Pass.
Pass. General Pass was fantastic. Glenn?
Meade.
Meade? Yeah.
I'm Kristen. I
Kristen.
go Green.
What's that?
Green.
Green.
Everyone's going with, I don't know.
It's a good name.
I guess I'll go with green.
You're going green too?
Name is Christian. I'd go with green too.
Christian, go with green. Hey, Christian, sorry about the advice about Chubby's. I didn't know it was closed.
Oh, you're the one.
This is poor Christian. He said, where do you get good barbecue? Have you tried such and such a place? And I go, I don't go there. Go to Chubby's. And I had no idea that the building isn't even standing.
Oh, that's the one on 15?
Yeah.
Yeah, it's gone.
It's completely gone.
And I didn't go down there. I mean,
No, I know, but you looked online. It's completely raised.
Yeah, there's nothing there.
But I did go to sat at the next door and had a couple of drinks.
Where'd you go? Oh, okay. So it's
Restaurant
Yeah.
next door, and I ordered to go, but it was the brisket was fine.
okay.
I wondered why it's gone.
I think the guy tried to sell, and he was retiring. And
There was an Irish place on the right side of 15 going south. That's gone.
completely gone.
That's been gone a couple years.
Yeah, that was
If
the
you listen to
Shamrock.
AG today, you would have had the whole
Shamrock.
story.
I don't even get home till 6:30.
Well, you
chasing kids.
You don't have to catch it live. Yes, sir.
Name's Eric.
Eric.
Based on tonight, gotta go with Hancock.
Yeah.
Superb.
Jeff.
Jeff, Hancock as well.
Hancock. Jeff's wife. What's your name?
Brandy.
Brandy.
I do have a question afterwards if you have time.
Well, ask it now.
Well, I was wondering what happened to a lot of these families who lost the Bliss farm was set on fire. There wasn't insurance back then, right? So what happened
Yeah.
to these families?
Good
That's
question.
a whole other episode.
Well, the rules were, if this is how the rules are supposed to be, if the United States government had anything to do with it, we compensate you, not for what it's worth, but what we think you should get. In the case of the Bliss farm, the United States Army burned it down. That poor fellow didn't get anything. And he ends up selling below market value to the Corderi's family that's down the road. But it depends on who ruins your place. If it's the Confederates, well, we didn't do it. We don't have to pay anything. The Union Army saying that. If it was the government, federal government doing it, in other words, the Army, you were supposed to apply and get some sort of recompense. In William Bliss's case, he didn't get nothing. And his ancestors kept trying to get money. I think they finally did get something. Wasn't worth. It didn't help their house. That's clearly not there anymore. And then Dwight D. Eisenhower shows up running tanks all over the place, and using up the bank for the bank barn.
The Spangos only got $105 for thousands of dead people on the wall.
Yeah. They didn't get those who got stuff didn't get a lot.
They would make claims.
Was there
and then
anybody
they'd
who
get
got
whatever
what
they
they asked for? No, right? They all got less than what they asked for.
If they got anything.
What they got was freedom.
Oh, that's right. Enjoy your freedom, even though you got no money, no house. Enjoy your freedom. So, okay, who's your MVP?
I guess I'll agree with the people to my right. It's in Hancock.
The people to my right.
Stella Beard, the 2022 listener of the year, the first listener of the year. Stella Beard. And then she stopped listening once she won the award.
Where else to go?
Go ahead and speak up a little bit of something.
Tried to get the award from Jim Hester.
Yeah, I know. Are you still wearing his shirt? Yes, you are.
Yeah, I am.
We're going to have to blur these two. In that
That's why I wore the sweater.
Thank you.
Now, I would sit here and I would say Chamberlain, but I'm kidding.
No.
No, seriously, I am.
He saved the entire United States of America in one fell swoop.
Listen.
Yeah.
Now, I'm going to go with Hancock.
It's a good one, Rich.
You know, it's tough for me because I'm a big meat guy. And I don't want to diminish what Hancock does, but I look at Hancock too, and man, all 3 days.
It's tough.
You know, you forget, he's up here the night of the first. He's so active the second day, and then, he's there in the thick of it.
Just go with the 99th Pennsylvania, the whole regiment.
I just got to split the baby, Matt. Hancock, Meade together.
Okay.
Go for both of them.
That's fine. I mean, there's no wrong answer here. Kevin.
I'm gonna go with Meade.
Meade.
Yeah. He sent Hancock, so.
Okay. 6 questions.
Meade.
McGilvery. McGilvery. That's a good one. I like that.
I'm a logistics guy. I got to go with Meigs for the first, second, and the third.
Montgomery Meigs?
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. I like that.
I'm going with Meade.
Going with Meade?
Yep.
Meade. Eric?
What are you looking for?
I got the whole floor now?
Yeah.
Well, I came here thinking I was going to say Green. Then I went to Hancock. I'm going with Meade for the simple reason. Earlier, I said it yesterday, last week, and I said it again today. Lee didn't change Lee had 6 to 7 weeks to change his style and to adapt to his leaders. He didn't do it. Meade had 3 days, and he was able to provide effective leadership of the Army and had much more of a hands-on role today than he did yesterday on the 1st.
Yeah.
So I'm going partially because of what I said about Lee not doing what he should have done. Meade did do that, and he managed his team well and had a successful day.
Lewis.
Lieutenant Colonel David Ireland from Scotland.
David Ireland from Scotland. All right. I would say originally I was thinking Green because, he's got a tough job, right? He's got 1,300 men up against almost 5,000.
He's old.
He's old. Yeah. His boss is younger than him, and he made fun of him when he wanted to take it. He called him names. So I was thinking him at first, but now the more I think about it and the more I hear everybody, I think I have to agree it's Meade. And the 3 days, his 3 days, and then during the battle, he has the brains to not screw it up by going, I can handle all this, no, he asks his subordinates their opinion, he gets them on board with his plan, and he trusts them to run their sector.
And empowers them.
And he empowers them to do it, yes. I think you have to say Meade, yeah. So that's who I would say. Rob, who's yours?
My what?
Your MVP of July 2nd.
We all saw it earlier.
Come out here, Rob, so the people can see you. I'm sure your mother wants to see you at home. This is Rob Williams. Now, do you have an MVP for July 2nd?
And William Colville. I don't know.
Okay. Yeah, that's a good one. Thank you. All right, go.
I mean, not really, but he's one of the ones I find the most interesting.
Well, it took a lot of balls to follow that order.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Not overall MVP, but, a good one to pay attention to.
Okay. I like that. Yeah, we didn't even talk about them.
No. Ask Ashley and see if she gets it right.
Ashley, who's your MVP?
Because her ride depends on it.
I always agree with Lewis.
There you go. Oh, that's a great answer.
He just wanted her to say that on tape.
She just lied, by the way.
That was planned, I think. Yeah. All right. Well, listen. Thank you all for coming out. Thank you, Rob, for everything you guys have done here at the seminary. Really, ladies and gentlemen at home, if you've never visited the seminary on your visit, it's the Seminary Ridge Museum and Education Center, but it's in the old seminary building. You got to come out here. It's got a story to tell, and you've got to come and check it out. What is it? 3 floors of exhibits. You've got the cupola, which is outstanding if you can get up there. You can even see forest fires up there.
Yeah.
Yes.
He chose State Forest, chose the new Pope. all that smoke.
They chose Steve Pope. That's funny.
But in the next couple of weeks, Cody H., our Director of Education and Interpretation, is going to be installing close to 100 new artifacts.
Wow. Yeah. So by the time this comes out, they'll have all new artifacts.
Yeah.
So even if you have been here before, come back because you will not have seen what they have here. You want to give us a sneak peek, maybe one or two? Or do you not know yet?
Oh, I know. I mean, yeah. I've been
Name one.
Books. No.
Oh, books.
No, there's actually some really cool stuff coming from the National Museum of Health and Medicine.
Okay.
Oh,
good.
yeah, some
Yes.
really good stuff.
Which would make sense because this was a hospital.
It was.
Yeah, it was. So anyway, come and check it out. I want to thank all of you guys for coming and your support as patrons. And for those of you who are freeloaders, thank you for that too. Thanks, Rob. Yeah. We've got to thank Dan back there behind the camera, Court back here. Court warmed up the audience before with a song made in the palms of hands. It's just beautiful. And that's it. I want to thank all of you for watching at home, and we will see you tomorrow when we talk about July 3rd with Jim Hessler from here as well. We'll see you then. Thanks, everybody. Thank you.
Our hearts so stout have got us famed, forsooth 'tis known from whence we came. Wherever we go, they dread the name of Gary Owen in glory. Instead of spa or drink down ale and pay the reckoning on the nail, no man for debt shall go to jail from Gary Owen in glory. Instead of spa or drink down ale and pay the reckoning on the nail, no man for debt shall go to jail from Gary Owen in glory.
Thanks for watching. And if you enjoyed this video, we have a lot more content for you over at patreon.com/Addressing Gettysburg. Also, you can make a tax-deductible donation to help support more videos like this at dhpioneers.com.